Welcome back to the Fight Society podcast. I'm your host, Damon Martin, and we're doing a little special edition of the podcast this week because, as everyone knows, The Ultimate Fighter airs on Wednesday nights on FS1, and had a chance to catch up with one of my favorite people from the show earlier today. Lauren Murphy joins me right now because, we got some stuff to talk about with this episode, so I figured why not we just do a special podcast and let her voice be heard on this whole thing.
Thank you so much.
So let me just, obviously the episode just aired, so everyone's seen what was going on. This is directly after your fight with Nico Montano. Obviously it was a heartbreaking loss. I'm not going to pretend to know you that well, but I feel like I know you enough to say that I know it was a devastating loss. It was a tough thing to suffer through, like any loss. I imagine no loss is fun. But there was some weird stuff going on in the episode this week where, you skipped out on an early morning practice. Now I'm guessing this was literally the day after your fight?
Yeah, it was like, I think I had fought like 14 hours prior. And, everybody saw that fight was a war. Like, it was a really tough fight. I kind of got beat up. And, yeah, the next morning, I literally felt like I had been in a car accident, like, the day before, And, yeah, I took the morning off, which, most fighters will take a whole week off after they fight. And obviously that's not really an option on The Ultimate Fighter, but you could take a day off and it's not going to hurt anything, it's probably going to help a lot. So I just figured a morning off wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah, and I think most people, I always bring this up when I talk about The Ultimate Fighter because it airs over 12 weeks on television, but I don't think a lot of people still realize this all happens over like a 5 or 6 week period. So everything's really condensed. Like, your fight to the next fight, we're talking about, a matter of days. So we're not talking about like, you had like 3 days off and then you just didn't go to the next practice. Like this was literally the next day.
Yeah, exactly. Like 14 hours later. And our time slot for practices was the early morning practice. So you have to, get up early, get your breakfast in, get ready to go. The van picks you up at 9:30 in the morning, and then your practice starts at 10. And man, I just needed a couple extra hours of sleep. I needed a good cry. I needed a good breakfast. Like I just needed a morning off away from the coaches, away from the women on the team. Like that's just kind of the person that I am. Like I don't want everybody in my face when I'm feeling like that. And honestly, I don't even think that's like the kind of person I am. I think that's a human thing. If you're going through a really tough time, the last thing you want is to be surrounded by strangers in a competitive environment. Like I just needed a morning off to myself,
Yeah.
So I took it. Like I'm not afraid to say what I want. I'm not afraid to do what I want. Like it was I made that choice, and I think like I'm a grown-ass woman. I can make my own decisions,
Yeah. Well, this is such a different season, kind of like with season 20 where they were, crowning a champion, is that they have veterans on the show. But even with this show, there were some fighters who didn't have as much experience. But obviously, you had Invicta, you had UFC experience. You're a veteran, so I imagine you kind of know yourself, you know your body, you know your mentality. When you need a little time off, you take a little time off. And I understand the kind of rigorous training schedule that goes along with the Ultimate Fighter, but you know your body and you know what you need to react. And I don't think a morning off is the end of the end of the world necessarily. I think most fighters coming off a loss would probably want to take 2 or 3 days off minimum. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and it's absolutely crazy. Like for sure, for Eddie to say that I must not be built for this because I didn't go into the gym the morning after I was on the wrong end of a fist fight is like, that's just crazy to me. Like ask Eddie if he went into the gym the morning after Conor McGregor knocked him out. Because I guarantee you he wasn't skipping into the gym to help his teammates get ready for their next fight. Eddie went home with his family. Like, he got to get on his little smartphone and order some good food and, like, process what had happened and whatever he needed to do after he lost. And on The Ultimate Fighter, we don't have that. We can't contact our families. We don't get to have our normal comforts around us. We don't even get to have a fucking phone. Like, we don't get to have our smartphones, So for him to expect everybody to just be like a robot and a machine and not feel anything when this is for the UFC belt, like you would think Eddie of all people would be more understanding about how devastating that loss was.
Yeah. Well, he had that speech earlier in the season when he was talking to Ariel Beck when she was going through kind of a panic attack, and he was very poignant. I thought that was a great speech where he talked about, dealing with the devastating loss to Conor McGregor, and it was a embarrassing moment, probably felt like the worst moment in his world, but he said, I'm not quoting him here, but I think he said something like, a few days later, I kind of realized that, my family still loves me, and, the people who are around me still, support me, blah, blah, blah. And I thought that was, some great advice, and I agree. I think that was some great advice. But even he, dealt with a pretty dark period in his life for at least a couple days, after losing that fight.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what it was for me. It was a really dark period, and at that time, it's still new in the season. I didn't know really anything about these other women, and as you guys watch the rest of the show kind of unfold, and you see who emerges on the top and everything else, and I think as the show progresses, I think people will be a little more understanding. But at this point in time, none of us knew anything. All we knew is that there was this huge upset. It was me. It sucked. I lost in the first round. Even what if we had met in the semifinals? What if we had just had a little bit different matchup and Nico and I had met in the semifinals? At least I could say, well, I made it really far on tough. But for me to lose in the first round was just it still hurts my heart, honestly. And I really like Nico. I'm super happy that she beat a veteran and has this big moment in her life. And it was depressing for me, and it was really hard. Yeah. It was not my funnest day.
We saw that. So I'll come back to the TV version of the events in a second. But when you were in the gym, because I know he kind of talked to you a little bit on what we saw on the cameras, when you first came back in the gym for the afternoon practice, which once again, that is the same day. So literally, it's not like you skipped a day or two of practice. It's literally the same day, just later in the afternoon. What did he say to you at that point? Was it that confrontational at that moment? Because it didn't seem like that on TV. But you tell me what maybe we didn't see on TV.
No, I had no idea that Eddie had done these interviews talking a bunch of shit about me. I didn't know. I knew he wasn't happy about me not going into the gym, but none of the girls would tell me what he said. So the girls came back from their morning practice, and I was like, did Eddie talk a bunch of shit about me? And they were kind of no, don't worry about it, nothing. Well, and then I watched the episode, and I'm like, holy shit, he's saying a bunch of hurtful shit, I can't believe that. And then when I went to the afternoon practice, we talked a little bit, and I get where he's coming from, okay, but I just think one morning is not unreasonable to ask for, And I kind of told him that, and he said, "Thank you for not bringing a bad attitude on the mat." He thanked me for not coming in the next, if I was really sad or if I was emotionally stressed out or whatever. He was like, oh yeah, well, thanks for not bringing that on the mat. I understand. There was none of this talk about how selfish I am or how the team is depending on me or how I'm bringing down the morale by not being there. What a bunch of bullshit. I walk in and he totally changed his tune. So, knowing that had happened and then watching what he said on the episode, it just kind of blows my mind to think that somebody could be so two-faced in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. Is it also tough to deal with when like you said, because when you came in the gym on the episode, he said something to you, but it was very matter of fact, and I know you were still kind of in an emotional moment, understandably so, but that seemed like it was kind of the end of it. And then obviously I know these interviews, I don't know if they take place the same day or the next day or whatever. I know they're in private, so other people can't see what's being said, but I imagine it's kind of got to floor you a little bit, when you hear these kind of things after what you assumed was, kind of a done deal. It was over and there was nothing else really to say about it.
Yeah, if I had known that he had said the things he had said, I would have addressed it. That's the kind of person I am. And I actually did an interview that they didn't show where I was pretty mad. I knew Eddie had said something kind of shitty, but I didn't know what it was. And so I started getting pissed off, and I didn't even have a direction to point in because I didn't know what he had said. And so, yeah, I think it would have gone differently when I walked in the gym if I had known what he had said about me. But I think it's crazy for him to say that those girls depend on me. I'm not their coach. He's the coach. They're depending on him. Don't put that shit on. He got paid to be an Ultimate Fighter coach. The UFC paid him to go in there, be the coach, and get those girls ready for their fights. That's not my job. That's his job. And then to say that I'm, bringing down the morale of the team, who's bringing down, I was at home quietly, and he was the one talking shit about one of the team members to the rest of the team. But I'm the one bringing down morale? Come on. it just seems crazy to me. And if I had known that he had said those things, I probably would have addressed it with him, but I was totally in the dark until, this afternoon.
Yeah. When the season started, one of the things that Eddie had said when he selected you was, and he started coaching you, was how easy it was to coach you because you're a veteran. You obviously had that experience. You knew what it was like to be in those big fights, things like that, and he appreciated having your kind of experience on the team because this season, unlike even season 20, was there are still some kind of inexperienced women on the show. Let's be honest. I mean, fighters with 2-2 records. That's not to knock them. I'm just saying that, but they didn't have a wealth of experience like you did. After this experience, and I know, obviously, you got to go through the rest of the season, what's going to be on video because that's already taped and already done with. But sitting here right here today, would you say your opinion of Eddie Alvarez has changed just based on this episode?
Yeah, well, to put it lightly, it wasn't great when I left the house as it was. Like, by the time the season was over, my opinion of Eddie was not very high as it was, and now it's even lower. Like, it's below dirt. You know what I mean? I can't believe that he would say those things about somebody that he was just speaking so highly of, and then especially to say it to the rest of the team. And I don't know, but they probably won't show this because it was kind of unspoken, but it actually did cause some, tension between me and some of the other members of Team Alvarez. So there was definitely a morale issue, but I think it came from Eddie talking a bunch of shit while I wasn't there, not because I wanted to take a rest day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know, and you're part of a massive team down in Arizona, the MMA Lab, where so many great fighters train out of, obviously, Benson Henderson, Brian Barberina. I mean, the list goes on the guys and girls that train down there. So you know what it's like to be part of a team when someone deals with a tough loss and, supporting them. Like, it almost feels like in that moment, you want to hold them up more than pull them down. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times, like, when you deal with a loss, like, nothing I say or anyone else is going to say to you is going to make you feel better, but you just don't want people to make you feel worse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a good example is Benson Henderson just had a tough loss this weekend, and I thought he won that fight, and he took the next day off. Benson Henderson, one of the greatest athletes of all time, took a day off after he fought. He came in and coached our practice on Tuesday, and, he didn't work out with us, but he did come in and coach us and help us out, and we all just love him. We just told him, man, we thought you won that fight. We love you. You're going to get the next one. You're still our champ. You lift people up in that situation. You don't fucking kick them while they're down,
Yeah. Do you feel like any of this? And I understand it because I've been around the Ultimate Fighter enough to know that it is still a reality show. Beyond anything else, it is a reality show. Things are kind of set up that way. But do you believe that any of this was just the emotion of the reality show? Hey, here's a camera, you got to say something kind of spicy, or do you think that was just Eddie being Eddie, and then he just kind of turned a different cheek when he actually saw you?
I think it's just Eddie being Eddie. I think probably in the moment he really did believe those things, and he's probably just talking himself up, and then once you see somebody, it's hard to have confrontation. It really is. It's hard for anybody. And I think maybe once I came in for the afternoon practice, he kind of had to eat his words a little bit because there I was, day after the fight, I had taken 2 hours off and then came back in, and I was trying to have a good attitude and trying to be there for my other, team members. And I think he kind of just had to eat his words a little bit once he saw me in there. And, maybe he realized, once I got in there, maybe he realized, how broken I actually was about that loss. I did take that loss really hard. It was extremely hard to deal with, without my family and without my team there and without the normal comforts that you have. And I think once he kind of saw that, and I started crying when he was talking to me, and I had to walk away for a sec. I think that kind of brought it home for him that, losses hurt. And I don't know when he got knocked out by Connor, but maybe it reminded him of how bad that loss hurt him and how shitty it feels. And, we never specifically addressed it like that because I didn't know what he said about me. But hopefully, I hope that Eddie fucking gets it, that what he did is wrong,
Yeah. Well, and knowing that you're upset like this, because again, this is a weird situation because this isn't a coach in your own gym where you could actually, you wouldn't go on a podcast, you would just go and, confront them in the gym. Do you think at this point, do you have any interest in actually talking to Eddie about it, or do you care at this point? Is having a conversation with him now that the show is over?
I mean, whatever. I would just tell him all the shit I'm telling you right now. You know, like I mean, he's gonna hear it one way or the other, I hope. And actually, like, I am the kind of person that on the show I told him, like, I'm really angry. I think it's. Hold on, just a sec. Somebody's calling me. Hold on. I have to get them to stop beeping in my ear. So. What the hell were we talking about? Oh, I'm the kind of person that I put it all out on the table. So anything that I'm thinking or feeling, like, I'm going to tell you about it. If you piss me off, I'm going to tell you about it. If you do something that worries me, I'm going to tell you about it. You know, that's just how I am. And I did tell Eddie while we were on the show, like, hey, I think it's really inappropriate that you wanted me to come in the next morning. Like, I was really, really mad at you. I said a bunch of shitty stuff about you in an interview. Like, I told him all of that, and that's when he thanked me for not bringing bad attitude on the mat. That was when he was like, well, I understand, and I don't mind. What he said was, I know what kind of man I am, and basically he was like, I'm comfortable with who I am, so what other people say about me doesn't matter. And thanks for not bringing a shitty attitude in here. And I was like, yeah, you're fucking welcome. Like, we kind of stopped talking about it after that.
Yeah, it's such a tough situation because, like I said, you're a veteran. You know what you need. You know what your reaction is to a fight, before a fight, after a fight. And this is just one of those ugly situations where it's like, you have to, you're in unfamiliar territory. Like I said, I'm quite sure if this was any other moment when you deal with a loss, you want to sit with your husband, you want to talk to your kid, you want to do whatever it is you normally do, and you don't have those options in the Ultimate Fighter. So I understand it's just a tough situation all around. It just sucks that you don't get that little bit of leeway, you don't get that little bit of space, because I'm imagining, because I've never fought professionally, but when I lose at anything, I'm upset. So I can only imagine when you lose a situation like that, you just want a little peace and quiet, you want a little time to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're all competitive. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm really competitive, as if the other girls aren't, because we are all super competitive. But for me, yeah, like, every time I lose, my heart breaks a lot. Like, it's not a small thing to me. And I was seated really high in this tournament, and I felt so confident going into this. I felt so confident going on the Ultimate Fighter. I felt in my heart, I was like, this is my time. Like, I'm going to be a UFC champion. I can't wait. I can't believe it. Like, this is it. I just knew in my heart I was winning the whole fucking thing. And then to lose, not just lose, but lose in the first round was like, I felt like my whole world was like crashing down on me. And then to be among strangers in a strange land, it was probably one of the harder things that I've had to walk through as an adult, and I've done some difficult things as an adult, but that experience, it was very difficult.
Yeah, understandably so. Well, Lauren, I appreciate you breaking everything down for me. I know we were kind of joking around on Twitter. I had an idea what you wanted to talk about after I saw the episode, so I was not surprised, because even in that moment when I watched it, I was like, whoa, that seemed kind of surprising. And I know Eddie a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like we're best friends. I've interviewed him a bunch of times. He's always been, like a nice enough guy to me, when I've met him and things like that. But even that, just in that moment, because you were one of the most veteran fighters on the show, it just seemed kind of like a surprising thing, like you're not built for this thing was like, whoa, that seemed a little out of left field to me. So even I was kind of taken back when that happened. So if I was taken back by it, I can completely understand why you were taken back by it.
I honestly think a small part of Eddie was kind of mad at me for losing. And, like, I don't blame him for that. Like, he's human. He probably felt frustrated that one of his, top-seeded, top-ranked fighters that he had a lot of belief in, like, he really believed in me a lot. And I think it really disappointed him, and whatever pissed him off that I lost, and for him to say that, like, oh, I tell these girls all the time, doesn't matter what happens, it just matters how you react to it. That's actually a bunch of bullshit. Like, I don't remember him telling us that all the time, ever. Like, I don't even know what he's fucking saying when he said that, because I don't remember him telling us that a bunch. But I think it did. I think it just disappointed him and made him kind of mad that, like, I couldn't get the win in that fight, and there was kind of this feeling between me and Eddie and me and a few of the other women on that team that maybe I just didn't perform that day. And it was kind of hinted at in a couple conversations, and it was suggested by a few people that, like, maybe I just didn't show up. And that was really frustrating to me, because I did show up that day. I fought my fucking ass off. Like, I would love to say, like, oh, I just didn't show up that day, and that's why Nico won. But that's not true. I fought so hard, and I tried all the little tricks that I knew, and, like, I showed up that day, you know? And I just wasn't able to pull out the win. Like, she was just a better competitor that night. And for people to then tell me that, you know, like, I just had a bad day that day and I just didn't show up, or I didn't perform to my full potential, it really fucking made me mad. Like, I'm not that kind of person that doesn't show up, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So I think Eddie was a little frustrated with me.
Yeah, well, I understand the frustration. Like I said, I really appreciate you breaking everything down with me. I'm sure as the season rolls on, we'll catch up again. But I appreciate you kind of giving me the inside scoop on everything that happened, and obviously your reaction to that. Because, like I said, that's the interviews, things like that. Those are things you don't see until the episode airs. So this is like literally the first time you're seeing some of this stuff. So I appreciate you breaking everything down with me, Lauren. Next time we talk, we'll move on to happier subjects like booking your next fight and you know, when you're making your return to action, all those kind of things. But I do appreciate you breaking down everything with me today.
I would love that, and I will hopefully talk to you soon. We can do this again anytime, because the season does get a little bit crazy as it goes on. So.
I told you earlier in the season. I was like, I have a feeling we're going to do a couple of these interviews during the season, because I don't know how the season plays out, but I just know how the Ultimate Fighter is. I'm quite sure there's going to be some stuff we need to talk about later in the season.
For sure, and I would be glad to come and squawk at you anytime.
Awesome, Lauren. Well, I appreciate it again. Thank you so much, and we will catch up soon.
All right, thanks a lot, Dan.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There you go, Lauren Murphy. Want to say thank you to her for joining the show in this special edition of the Fight Society podcast. Obviously, you just saw the episode, so you can kind of react. What are your thoughts on everything that went down with Eddie Alvarez and Lauren Murphy on this episode? Make sure you follow us on iTunes, on YouTube. You can follow us on SoundCloud as well, and then follow me on Twitter at Damon Martin. If you have questions or anything from the podcast, hit me up on there. # Fight Society. Want to say a big thank you again to Lauren Murphy for coming on the show, and we will see you guys next week with more Fight Society podcasts back at our normal time as we gear up for UFC 216, Ferguson versus Lee.